Radio. Promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar and 1 p.m. in Abuja. Good afternoon and welcome to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar and around the world on wadr.org. First, our top stories. Human Rights Watch accuses Niger's junta of deepening repression 3 years after military takeover. ECOWAS announces push for West Africa's single currency in 2027, raising questions over readiness.
I don't see the practicality of launching the ECO 2027. It is not just possible. And the reason for that is the global dynamic.
African Union to address xenophobic attacks against Africans in South Africa amid tensions. And Liberia launches investigation after record cocaine seizure worth more than $317 million.
What the seizure means, it just exposes our vulnerability. It's so worrisome. And the way it happens suggests to me that the guys feel comfortable.
Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is a More Edit.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast and a warm welcome to all of our listeners across the sub-region and beyond. This afternoon, we'll begin in Niger, where nearly 3 years after seizing power in the military coup, the country's ruling junta is facing fresh criticism over its human rights record. In a report released today, Human Rights Watch says the military authorities have tightened their grip on power by dismantling democratic institutions, shrinking civic space, and intensifying repression against political opponents, journalists, and civil society groups. Veronica Njai has more details in this report.
The rights group says since overthrowing President Mohamed Bazoum in July 2023, Niger's military rulers have steadily expanded their powers while weakening institutions meant to hold them accountable. According to Human Rights Watch, the authorities have dissolved political parties and independent unions, suspended civil society organizations, prosecuted journalists under cybercrime laws, stripped opposition figures of their nationality, and prolonged the political transition without a roadmap for elections. The organization also expressed concern over the continued detention of former President Mohamed Bazoum, his wife, former Interior Minister Hama Amadou Souley, and prominent human rights defender Musa Tiangari. It notes that the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention has ruled that the detention of both Bazoum and Tiangari violates international human rights law and has called for their immediate release. Human Rights Watch further criticized recent legal changes extending pretrial detention in terrorism-related cases, saying they risk being used to keep critics behind bars for prolonged periods. Human Rights Watch is urging the Nigerian military authorities to end arbitrary detention, restore fundamental freedoms, and present a credible roadmap for a return to constitutional rule.
Veronica Njai filed a report. Meanwhile, Ghanaian President John Dramani Mahama announced earlier today that the African Union has agreed to place xenophobic attacks in South Africa on the agenda of its next summit as diplomatic tensions between Accra and Pretoria continue to rise. Mahama said African Union Commission Chairperson Mahmoud Ali Yusuf gave the commitment during talks in Accra. He stressed that Ghana has no hostility towards South Africa but cannot ignore attacks on Ghanaian citizens and other Africans. The move follows the repatriation of hundreds of Ghanaians from South Africa and comes amid a wider regional concern, with several African countries also evacuating citizens after anti-immigrant violence and protests. Ghana says a coordinated continental response is needed to protect African citizens and preserve regional unity. Meanwhile, former Senegalese President Macky Sall is among candidates presenting their visions for the future leadership of the United Nations as the race to succeed Antonio Guterres moves forward. The candidates are taking part in a public meeting in New York organized by the UN General Assembly aimed at promoting transparency and allowing member states and civil society to hear their priorities for the world body's next leader. The process to select the next Secretary General was launched in 2025, with candidates required to submit their vision statements and credentials as part of the appointment procedure. Macky Sall, who served as Senegal's president from 2012 to 2024, is a candidate officially supported by Dakar. President Bashir Diomaye Faye has instructed Senegal's diplomatic network to mobilize support for his predecessor's bid. Now, ECOWAS leaders are renewing their push for the launch of the ECO following their heads of state summit in Sierra Leone. The regional body says the long-delayed currency will be introduced gradually, with countries meeting key economic benchmarks including inflation control, debt sustainability and monetary stability expected to join first. But questions remain over member states' readiness and the currency framework. To examine the opportunities and challenges surrounding the ECO, WDL spoke with Dr. Lester Tenney, Vice President for Fiscal Affairs at the University of Liberia.
I don't see the practicality of launching the ECO 2027. It is not just possible. And the reason for that is the global dynamics. We have what we call exchange rate pass, RPT. It has to be understood very clearly. The transmission mechanism, you also need to consider what will be the determinant of the currency. There are several dimensions that need to be clearly understood. So it is not just the issue of launching a currency for the sake of a currency. It's the issue of understanding the ramification on various economies. Rushing with the process will create more economic backlash as compared to the dividend that its launch is intended to bring. Don't get me wrong, a single currency will promote trade. Businesses in various countries will have a seamless transaction, which eventually will reduce transaction cost. There will be price stability. If it is managed properly, there will be price stability, which will be reflected in a reduced inflation. A single currency gave birth to economic integration. What does that mean is that it will create a more unified regional market, and it will make it easier for goods, services, labor, and capital to move seamlessly across borders. Of course, a single currency usually attracts investment, and the potential in West Africa in terms of favorable investment is very, 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 very encouraging.
Dr. Lester Tenney is Vice President for Fiscal Affairs at the University of Liberia. Do join us much later in the news for the guest interview segment.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
In Benin, former President Thomas Boniayi has announced that he will take up a seat in the country's newly created Senate. After 2 years of opposing the creation of the institution, the former head of state has reversed his position. As an ex-official member of the new chamber, Boniayi says he has now decided to serve the Senate. In a statement read in the day at his residence, the former president explained the reasons behind his change of stance. Usman Rao provides the details.
Former President Thomas Boniayi has reversed his opposition to the creation of the country's Senate, saying the current political landscape has changed since the constitutional reform was introduced. Boniayi, who had strongly opposed the Senate and vowed never to serve in the institution, now says a chamber dedicated to political consultation has become necessary, with Parliament largely dominated by a single political majority. The former president now believes the Senate can provide a platform for dialogue on key national issues. He says he remains committed to promoting human rights, democracy, peace, national unity and political dialogue. The Beninese Senate is scheduled to hold its preparatory meeting on July 24 ahead of its official inauguration on July 30.
Usman Amar with that report is filed in by our Cotonou correspondent Aziz Adam Sule. In Guinea, the process of setting up the National Assembly's key structures has been completed. The Assembly's leadership, parliamentary groups and various committees have now been established. Members of the presidential majority have formed a single parliamentary group, while opposing lawmakers and independent deputies have each created their own separate groups. Augustine Coley reports.
The new National Assembly has elected its leadership, including a speaker, 5 deputy speakers, 7 parliamentary secretaries and 2 parliamentary quaestors. However, opposition lawmakers and independent deputies failed to secure any positions within the Assembly's governing bodies. 3 parliamentary groups have now been formed. The first is made up of the ruling party, GMD, and its allies, representing the presidential majority with 127 lawmakers. The second group brings together opposition members, while the third is made up of independent deputies. The plan to create a single parliamentary group combining opposition and independent lawmakers has therefore been abandoned. The newly elected legislators say they are ready to introduce new laws aimed at strengthening oversight of government action, regulating rental prices, creating more employment opportunities for young people and protecting human rights. Political observers say that with the ruling majority holding 127 of the 147 seats in parliament, opposition and independent lawmakers may struggle to exert significant influence against the dominant parliamentary bloc.
General Alpha Ibrahim Abadi's report presented by Augustin Kohli. In Mali, the Criminal Chamber of the Bamako Court of Appeal is set to deliver its verdict this Friday in the trial of 5 accused of plotting against the transitional government. The defendants, who include both civilians and military officers, are all close associates of former transitional President Banjo. The case was adjourned for judgment after several days of hearings and the defense closing argument. Let's join Christopher Ticho for the details.
Lawyers representing 5 men accused of plotting against the country's transitional government have asked the court to acquit their clients, arguing that the prosecution failed to prove its case. During their closing argument, the defense challenged all the evidence presented by the state, saying the charges of conspiracy against the government and criminal association were not supported by the case file. They also pointed to inconsistencies in witness testimonies, arguing that the evidence was too weak to establish criminal responsibility. The defense further criticized the way the investigation was conducted, alleging that some of the accused were subjected to torture and other forms of ill treatment while in detention. The lawyers are seeking the acquittal of all 5 defendants, including former State Security Chief Colonel Major Kasum Goita and former Presidency Secretary General Kalilu Doumbouya. Both men continue to deny any involvement in an alleged plot to destabilize the transitional authorities. The prosecution, however, has requested a 20-year prison sentence for all 5 accused, insisting that the charges of conspiracy and criminal association have been proven. After hearing arguments from both sides, the Criminal Chamber of the Bamako Court of Appeal adjourned the case and is expected to deliver its ruling on Friday.
A report by Aliu Cham in Bamako and presented by Christopher Aticho. In Liberia, 2 suspects are in custody as authorities launch an investigation into the country's largest ever cocaine seizure during a security operation near Roberts International Airport. The Justice Ministry says the nearly 4 tons of cocaine seized have an estimated street value of more than $317 million. Officials say preliminary findings point to a sophisticated transnational trafficking network that may have been operating in Liberia for more than 6 years. From Monrovia, WDR's Ibrahim Parker reports.
Liberia's Joint National Security Investigative Task Force says it uncovered nearly 4 tons of cocaine during a court-authorized raid on a warehouse in the VOA community based on intelligence from an ongoing narcotics investigation. Authorities say the 3,971 kilograms of cocaine have an estimated street value more than $317 million. Investigators have also recovered a firearm, GPS tracking devices, a drone, diving equipment, and other materials believed to be linked. Speaking to WADR, former Liberian Immigration Service Commissioner General Steve Zacko says the latest seizure highlights the need for stronger enforcement of the country's anti-drug laws and better coordination among security agencies.
What the seizure means, it just exposes our vulnerability because the seizure is not a result of our own effective actions. It's so worrisome, and the way it happens suggests to me that the guys feel comfortable.
The latest operation comes just 6 weeks after authorities intercepted a $19.2 billion cocaine shipment at Roberts International Airport, prompting further public demands for accountability and stronger national security. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar and online at wadr.org. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Human Rights Watch accuses Niger's junta of deepening repression 3 years after coup. ECOWAS announces push for West Africa's ECO single currency in 2027, raising questions over readiness. African Union to address xenophobic attacks against Africans in South Africa amid tensions. And Liberia launches investigation after record cocaine seizure worth more than $317 million. Still ahead, we do have the press review, a guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
From the heart of Nigerian politics, this is Yechi Nusasitu in Abuja, and you are listening to WADR 94.9 FM Dakar.
We're also streaming live on wadr.org, Facebook, and on YouTube. The German government is reaffirming its support for Nigeria's fight against terrorism and violent extremism while pushing for deeper economic cooperation with Africa's largest economy. The pledge comes as concerns grow over the spread of insecurity from the Sahel into coastal states. Berlin has announced 10 million euros to support the return and reintegration of people displaced by insurgency in northern Nigeria. WDL's Yechi Nusasitu in Abuja reports.
German Foreign Minister Johann Wadr made the commitment during a visit to Abuja, where he held talks with Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Bianca Odumegwu Ojukwu.
Nigeria has stood on the front line in the fight against terrorism and violent extremism. These threats also infect us in Europe, and we can only address them effectively together. Germany, therefore, remains committed to supporting security, stabilization, humanitarian assistance, and development cooperation.
Germany is also committing 10 million euros this year to support the return and reintegration of people displaced from communities previously controlled by Boko Haram and Islamic State-linked militants. Nigeria's Foreign Affairs Minister Bianca Odumegwu Ojukwu says sustained international partnerships are essential to tackling the security threats facing West Africa.
Our partnership has become even more significant at a time when the international community is confronted with multiple and interconnected challenges, including geopolitical tensions, terrorism, violent extremism and climate change, irregular migration, food insecurity, and economic uncertainty.
The two countries also discussed expanding economic ties. Germany describes Nigeria as a key strategic partner, with bilateral trade reportedly growing by 10% last year. More than 100 German companies currently operate in Nigeria, while the country remains Germany's second largest trading partner in sub-Saharan Africa. For WADR, Yechi Nusasitu in Abuja.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
Let's cross over now to Accra as we join Nadi Ditete for the newspaper review.
Greetings, welcome to the newspaper review segment. We'll start off with the Daily Graphic newspaper as usual. Front page, at AU Health Summit in Accra, President Mahama urges self-reliant health care. And also here, media budget review today. I won't ask for more money. Finance Minister Dr. Kasiela Toforsen says, and Education Ministry sets to introduce revised kindergarten and primary curriculum. The Ghanaian Times newspaper, at AU Extraordinary Summit, Africa leaders seek to end AIDS and tuberculosis. Attorney General rejects Wuntumi's 30 million Ghana cedis plea bargain offer in Exim Bank case. Other stories, Bank of Ghana holds policy rate at 14% and cites global uncertainties as well as inflation risks. Media budget review, maintain fiscal discipline and avoid new taxes, experts tell government. The Daily Guide newspaper, Baumia and NPP MPs storm in Sawam prison, Wontumi declared political prisoner. Other stories here, Parliament approves $822 million World Bank loans, and 2026 mid-year budget review. Mahama forging economic success, that's according to the NPP. Also here, two busted with 100 wee parcels. The Daily Democrat, Finance Minister Atoforsen storms Parliament today for mid-year budget, seeks no additional money. Also here, President Mahama assents to law transforming GIPC into Ghana Investment Promotion Authority. That should be it for the newspaper review segment. Is back to you in the studio.
Many thanks, Nadia Ditete there with the newspaper review.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is a guest.
Well, reactions continue to trail ECOWAS' renewed push for the ECO single currency, raising fresh questions about its implementation, economic readiness, and what it could mean for regional integration. To take a closer look at the opportunities and challenges surrounding the proposed currency, here is Dr. Lester Tenney, Vice President for Fiscal Affairs and Professor of Macroeconomics at the University of Liberia.
There has to be first the gathering of economic data, each of the participant countries, economic data in terms of the various exchange rate, maybe quarterly data, annual data, GDP, population, consumer spending, consumer price index, the level of inflation. There are several data that need to be collected and analyzed because don't forget, each of the countries in Africa do not possess the same economic strength. Having a unified currency has several dimensions to smaller economies like Liberia, for example. So there has to be several studies that need to be conducted, several resolutions coming from those studies that will inform the decision of a single currency, the ECO.
ECOWAS has been talking about this for some time now. What has been holding back the implementation?
Some of the issues involve the risk associated with economies with different GDP. So, for example, one of the issues highlighted was the impact of contagion. Contagion basically is the impact of a shock that tends to spill over from one economy to another. For example, if you have a monetary shock like inflation in Nigeria, it tends to ripple into smaller economies that have the same currency. Countries in Africa need to think through very carefully. It's a good thing to have a single currency because there are several advantages, but also you need to weigh the disadvantages. So it's a process that requires long years of study, and that's one of the reasons why it has not been launched. Because the gathering of data it's just a single part. The most important part is to understand variation in different economies over a certain period of time.
Let's look at 2027 because that is the time or the date that ECOWAS has given to start ECO currency. How feasible is it looking at restructuring by some countries and global financial burdens?
I don't see the practicality of launching the ECO 2027. It is not just possible. And the reason for that is the global dynamics. We have what we call exchange rate pass, RPT. It has to be understood very clearly. The transmission mechanism, you also need to consider what will be the determinant of the currency. There are several dimensions that need to be clearly understood. So it is not just the issue of launching a currency for the sake of a currency. It's the issue of understanding the ramification on various economies. Rushing with the process will create more economic backlash as compared to the dividend that its launch is intended to bring. Don't get me wrong, a single currency will promote trade. Businesses in various countries will have a seamless transaction, which eventually will reduce transaction cost. There will be price stability. If it is managed properly, there will be price stability, which will be reflected in a reduced inflation. A single currency gave birth to economic integration. What does that mean is that it will create a more unified regional market, and it will make it easier for goods, services, labor, and capital to move seamlessly across border. Of course, a single currency usually attracts investment, and the potential in West Africa in terms of favorable investment is very, 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 very encouraging. So a unified currency would do that. It will also address the issue of exchange rate differential. We in Liberia use Liberian dollar. We have a dual currency regime. You want to buy something in Nigeria, you have to convert your Liberian dollar to Naira. So all of those issues of exchange rate difficulty will be managed. And then you will have a stronger bargaining power because an ECO currency will set the pace for economic strength in terms of an integrated regional GDP.
Dr. Lester Tenney is the Vice President for Fiscal Affairs and Professor of Macroeconomics at the University of Liberia. Well, in the sport news now, Morocco's women under-17 football team has won the North African Football Union UNAF tournament held in Tunisia from July 16 to 22, 2026. The Atlas Lionesses secured the title after a dominant 4-0 victory over host Tunisia in their final match, finishing top of the standings with 7 points from 3 games. The tournament forms part of Morocco's preparations for the FIFA Under-17 Women's World Cup, which the country will host later this year. Scheduled from October 17 to November in Rabat and Saleh, the World Competition will see Morocco compete in Group A alongside New Zealand, Germany and Argentina. Well, elsewhere, CAF President Patrice Motsepe has confirmed that the Africa Cup of Nations will expand to 28 teams from the 2027 edition, which will be hosted by Kenya, Tanzania and Uganda from June 19 to July 17, 2027. Motsepe said the increase reflects CAF's plans to grow the tournament further, after already changing the competition to every 4 years instead of every 2. Under the new format, the group stage will feature 7 groups of 4 teams. CAF says it will clarify the qualification system soon. Motsepe also announced a major prize money increase for the 2026 Women's Africa Cup of Nations. The winner will now receive $2 million, up from $1 million, while each of the 16 qualified teams will get at least $150,000. And we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Maudojo for the technical support. Don't forget that you can listen to us via mobile application WADR, available on the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. Well, coming up next at the bottom of the hour is a flagship environment program and Baroscope. Do join Memuna Fofana for our news in French and for chez vous at 1 p.m. I am Imo Edet. Good afternoon.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Baft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening to Newslink.